5-star character dupes are one of the foundations of gacha gaming. They're a way for players to acquire more power, show their undying dedication and loyalty to a character, and a fantastic way for developers to make money. It's oftentimes in a dev's best interest to make these upgrades powerful, but some devs go a bit too far, making them feel necessary for the character to work. These dupes are one of the biggest investments a player can make. With the resources you spend on unlocking a single ability for a character, you could have pulled a completely new character or a signature weapon, which are both typically a better use for your limited pulls or your money, especially if you're trying to get the best gameplay experience possible. However, there are some developers in the gacha space that, in recent years, have given their players a lot more incentive to dig into their wallets, not by making these bonuses very attractive, but by restricting the baseline power of the character in ways that feel very bad for the player unless they decide to spend. Instead of adding new features through these dupes, they lock what should have already been in their kit. And it's very clear which company is at the root of all these consumer-unfriendly business practices. Wuthering Waves, fortunately, is not a game that falls under this category. When you pull a character in Wuwa, you know that they're going to perform across their intended role with no strings attached. While there are some characters who can expand their use cases with additional investment, the baseline characters don't feel like a part of their kit has been taken out and locked behind additional spending, unlike other gacha games in the genre. Today we'll be diving into how this is the case, exploring why the design of sequence nodes across all of Wuwa's 5 stars differs so much from its competition, why other games' implementation have become so much more suffocating as time has gone on, and the many long-term benefits of Kuro's implementation that a lot of players haven't realized yet. This system can only get better with age, especially for our standard 5 stars. As always, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. A common trend you'll find across every limited character in Wuthering Waves is that all of their characters feel complete at S0. Early sequence nodes don't add entirely new abilities or interactions across their kit that feel necessary for them to function. You can't say the same for other games in the genre, and some of the biggest offenders in this category belong to everyone's favorite example of the sunk cost fallacy, Genshin Impact. Version 4.1 released 2 characters who, in all honesty, were not complete with just a single copy. Wriothesley, a main DPS, had a unique mechanic built into his normal attacks that increased their damage at the cost of his health until he reached 50% or lower, where he'd lose that damage bonus and stop consuming his HP. He'd unlock a special attack at 60% health that did a massive amount of bonus damage and healed him. The only thing is, this healing ability had a cooldown longer than the rate he'd lose health, making his playstyle one of the most nonsensical in the game at C0. He'd damage himself faster than he could heal, giving him awful uptime on the damage bonuses and making him completely non-functional as a DPS unless he had a healer on his team. When many meta teams ran a shielder instead of a healer, this meant that your limited DPS character had half the team comps of others, in a game focused around roster building. That is, unless you decided to pull for his first constellation, which granted him a free use of this special attack every time he completed his buffed attack chain, turning him into a self-sustaining unit that no longer needed a healer to just work in the first place, or an actual complete character. Wriothesley wasn't the only character in version 4.1 that had these handicaps built into their kit. Neuvillette, also released in 4.1, was not able to reach his full potential with his best teammate, Farina, as a major source of his damage bust in his kit didn't work if he had another Hydro character on his team. That restriction removed with his first dupe. Who cares that Neuvillette and Farina are a prominent duo featured across the entirety of Fontaine's story arc? You can't use them at their full potential unless you pull a second copy of Neuvillette. It's one thing to use the story to promote your on-banner character, it's another thing to completely nerf the performance of 2 characters who are meant to be together unless you pull dupes. The Genshin devs essentially locked the full functionality of these characters behind the gacha. Pulling the character wasn't enough. They needed you to pull for their first copy to make them feel complete and usable across their best teams. It's consumer-unfriendly, greedy, and a horrible experience for the players. And it's a business practice they carried forward into another game, Honkai Star Rail. Acheron is easily the biggest offender here when it comes to corporate greed. The character comes with arbitrary restrictions across her teams that requires 2 characters of a specific class to reach her full damage potential. Without these 2 additional Nihility characters, her output drops off a cliff. This meant her teammates were extremely limited compared to other main DPSs, but you could simply pull 2 more copies to remove this restriction completely. This is just another game by the same parent company focused on teams and roster building to clear content that released more characters with team comps paywalled behind dupes. Wuthering Waves and Kuro Games don't have the same design philosophy as Hoyoverse. Experimenting with teams and kits to spice up gameplay and try new combos is one of the greatest parts of a party-based game. Paywalling a character's potential to simply be used with other characters is one of the most consumer-unfriendly practices you can have. The closest example of this you can find across Wuwa's limited characters is Shorekeeper's S1, which increases the length and range of her liberation while giving her more freedom with her intro skill. But this upgrade mostly makes her easier to play. She already feels like a complete character at S0 across all of her teams. She didn't have components of her kit and viability locked behind a paywall. It's night and day compared to Hoyoverse. However, Wuwa standard characters are a different story. Kuro did in fact lock features behind dupes, giving every standard DPS an attribute damage bonus to the entire team after going through their entire rotation, turning them from a traditional hypercarry into a potential sub-DPS with enough dupes. While you could draw similarities between these upgrades and those in Hoyo games, the fact of the matter is that this is a far more consumer-friendly implementation. Limited characters are meant to be stronger or feel better to play than standard ones. You need incentives for players to pull on banners, and standard character dupes are inevitable as that player pulls because of lost 50/50s. So all these dupes do is add more meta viability to older characters every single player will eventually have access to. This also makes losing 50/50s sting a bit less, as they're actually building towards something useful, instead of upgrading a character like Diluc or Chi-Chi who will never see actual use on your account. That's a lot different from locking default capabilities of limited characters behind dupes, especially when some characters, like Wriothesley, have gone more than a year without a rerun banner. That's over a year of someone potentially having an incomplete character on their account with no opportunity to pull and fix them. That is a horrifying player experience. With that said, Wuthering Waves is still in its early stages. We're not even at the half anniversary yet, and there are still many more limited characters to come. But from what we've seen across Kuro's existing character design and clear dedication towards its players' enjoyment of the game, we likely won't be seeing cursed business practices like this in Wuthering Waves. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Peace out.